She was born to rule the stars, but now she's crawling through mud, hunted by the very empire that once called her their future. In a world forgotten by time, where the broken live in shadows and cages, a fallen princess meets a man forged by pain, and neither of them can survive alone. What begins as a desperate cry for help becomes a dangerous alliance, and a choice that could burn down the galaxy. Stay with us, because this is not just a story of survival. It's the beginning of a rebellion. If you are new here, then please subscribe this channel and show thumbs up by liking the video. Now let's move to this wonderful story. The sky broke open with a roar, and the rain came hard and cold. Thick clouds rolled over the horizon, swallowing the twin moons and casting the land in a dim gray shadow. Wind screamed through rusted towers, pulling at torn cables and scattering broken glass across the ground. The storm was not gentle. It tore at the world like claws. In the middle of that chaos, a girl crawled through the filth. Her name was Naira, though it meant nothing here. Back in the kingdom of Viralan, she was royalty, the only daughter of High Lord Varan and next in line to rule the skies. But that was before the ship went down, before the fire, before the screaming. Now, her name was just a whisper swallowed by the wind. Her body was scraped and bruised, her side bleeding from shrapnel. The dress she once wore at galas and councils now clung to her in rags, soaked with mud and smeared with ash. She moved on her hands and knees, every motion a struggle. Her breath came in short gasps, and the cold bit into her bones. Around her the land was quiet but not peaceful. Metal walls leaned like crooked teeth, and flickering lights sparked in broken circuits. The storm made everything worse. Rain, turning the dust to thick mud, lightning cracking in the distance. It wasn't supposed to end like this. She had escaped, barely, in an emergency pod. But it landed her here, in the sector they never talked about. The forgotten place. The stories said no one lived here. Or if they did, they weren't the kind of people you wanted to meet. Criminals, slaves, outcasts. Even nobles like her were warned never to come near it. But she hadn't chosen this place. The crash had brought her here. Now she had no weapons, no protection, and no idea what waited in the shadows. She pressed on, driven by pain and fear. Her hands slipped in the wet ground. Her knees trembled. Then she saw it. An old cage barely standing, hidden in the remains of a broken structure. A figure sat inside, quiet and still. She froze. He was human. That much was clear. Not one of her kind. His skin was marked with dirt and scars, his clothes torn, his eyes watching her with a calm that made her stomach twist. He didn't speak, didn't call out, just stared. It was like he had been waiting for her, though she was sure he couldn't have known she'd come. She forced herself to stand, legs shaking, and took a step toward him. "You," she said, her voice barely more than a whisper. "Please, help me." The man didn't move, didn't blink. Then, slowly, he smiled. It wasn't warm, it wasn't kind. It was a sharp smile, the kind that suggested he already knew, the ending to a story she hadn't begun. "I'm a princess," she said, clutching the bars of the cage. "From Viralan. My people will reward you. They'll pay." "You're not a princess here," he said, his voice rough like gravel. "Here, titles don't matter. Only survival." She shivered, the cold digging deeper into her skin. The rain poured harder. Thunder cracked above. She was barely holding herself up. "Please, just help me until they come." He looked at her wounds, the way she swayed on her feet, the fear in her eyes. Then he asked a question that chilled her more than the rain. "You're being hunted, aren't you?" She nodded slowly. "Then why come here?" he asked. "Why crawl into the place your people built to forget?" She didn't have an answer. Maybe she thought the people here would help her. Maybe she just had nowhere else to go. "You're safer inside," he said. "Let me in," she begged. He shook his head. "I don't have the key." She looked around. The other cages were locked too, rusted shut from years of decay. No guards, no lights. Whoever had run this place was gone, only the echoes remained. "Then help me find shelter," she said. Another smile, this one darker. "Why would I help you?" "Because I'm not your enemy." He stepped closer to the bars. His face was unreadable, but his eyes burned with something she couldn't place. "You are," he said. "Your kind built this place. Filled it with people like me." Naira's heart pounded. "I was just a child." "So was I," he replied. She didn't know what to say. Her hands trembled against the bars. "Then what do you want?" He studied her, quiet for a long moment. Rain fell between them. Lightning lit the sky. "You want my help?" he asked. She nodded. "Earn it." Her breath caught. "How?" "You'll see," he said. "Stay close, and if they come again..." "Why?" He leaned in, voice like a whisper of thunder. "Because I want to hear what they sound like when they die." Naira stepped back, unable to speak, and for the first time she wasn't sure who the real monster was. The rain didn't stop. It poured through the night, turning the compound into a swamp of rust and rot. The broken walls moaned in the wind, and flickering lights sparked in old machines, their systems still trying to run after all these years. Somewhere near the center of the ruin, Naira sat huddled beneath a bent metal beam. Her arms were wrapped. Around her knees, her back pressed to cold steel. Across from her, inside a cage that had not opened in years, the human sat silently. He hadn't spoken since their strange exchange, hadn't moved much either. He just watched, like he was still, deciding if she was real or worth the trouble. Naira hadn't slept. The pain in her side was dull now, more of a throb than a stab, but it kept her awake. That and the hunger. It gnawed at her like fire, something she had never truly felt before. In her old life, meals were served on silver trays by silent servants. Here in this dead place, hunger was a living thing. She couldn't stop shaking, whether from the cold or fear she didn't know. Finally she spoke. Her voice was rough from thirst. "Why did you let me stay?" The man didn't turn. He replied without opening his eyes. "I didn't." She blinked. "You said I could. Stay close." "I said you could scream," he said. "If they came." "I never said I'd save you." His words were blunt but not cruel, just honest. Too honest. She stared at him for a long moment, then asked, "Then why didn't you turn me away? You could have shouted, called someone. Why didn't you?" He finally opened his eyes and looked at her. "Because I wanted to see what you'd do." Naira lowered her head. Her pride still burned, even here, in the filth. "You think I'm weak?" "No," he said. "Just lost." She didn't answer. The storm outside cracked again, distant thunder shaking the ground beneath them. She glanced toward the broken gate. Whatever was out there hadn't found her, yet. "What do you want from me?" she asked, her voice quiet. His reply came slowly, carefully. "A trade." She looked up. "A trade?" He nodded. "You want protection, shelter, food. I want something too." "What?" she asked. "Maps," he said. "Codes, weak points, escape routes, anything your people tried to bury." Naira frowned. "You think I know those things?" "You were trained," he said. "I can see it, the way you talk, the way you move. You're not just some royal dressed in gold. You were raised to lead." She didn't speak right away. Because he was right. In the palace, she'd been taught structure layouts, emergency protocols, secrets buried beneath her city. Not for war, but for control. Now that knowledge was the only thing of value she had left. "I can't access systems here," she said. "Everything's offline." "Not asking for access," he replied. "Just memory. You remember things. Floor plans, locations, even rumors. Give me that, and you get to stay." She looked away. She hated the idea, trading her mind for her life. But she didn't have a choice. Not anymore. "What happens after?" she asked. "After I tell you everything?" You get to live, he said. His voice didn't shake. There was no hidden meaning, just truth. It chilled her more than the storm. Naira hesitated for only a moment longer before she whispered, "Fine, I'll help you." He nodded once. Nothing more. And the trade began. The next morning he made her crawl. Not walk, not stand. Crawl through the mud, through broken stone and puddles filled with rust. "Why?" she asked, gritting her teeth. "Because you need to learn," he said. "Learn what?" "What we are, and what you are now." She hated him for that, for the way he said it like a teacher, calm and cold. But she obeyed, not because he forced her to, but because some part of her knew, deep down, he was right. The girl she had been no longer existed. She had to break before she could survive. He gave her water. It was warm and tasted like metal, but it was clean. He gave her food, dry ration bars that crumbled in her mouth like ash. He gave her cloth for her wounds, torn from old uniforms. Every night he sat across from her and asked questions. Where's the main power line? How far from the gate to the nearest supply cache? Which tunnels connect the storage hub to the lower vaults? She answered what she could. Her mind worked faster than her body. And each time, he said nothing. Just listened and thought. On the 5th day, someone else came. A boy, younger, thinner, with a metal arm and nervous eyes. He approached the cage with caution and surprise. When he saw Naira, he froze. You didn't tell me she was real. He whispered to the older man. She's not royal anymore, the man said. She's from the throne. They'll come for her. I know. You trust her? The man looked at Naira. She met his eyes without blinking. No, he said, and walked away. That night, Naira sat closer to the cage, her voice softer than before. What's your name? She asked. He didn't answer. Please, she said. You know mine. Give me yours. He paused, then said, Call me Rowan. She smiled. It was the first real smile she'd had in days. Thank you, Rowan. He shook his head. Don't thank me yet. Why not? He leaned forward. His voice lowered, not with anger, but something darker. Because they're coming. For you. For me. For everyone in this place. And when they do, you'll have to choose. Choose what? She asked. He didn't answer. But his silence said everything. The air changed before the sound came. A strange stillness fell over the ruined compound, and even the wind seemed to pause. Naira felt it in her chest first, a kind of pressure, like something heavy was coming. She looked at Rowan, who had stopped, sharpening his blade. His eyes narrowed as he stared up at the cloudy sky, not blinking. What is it? She asked, her voice low. He didn't answer right away. He stood slowly, knife in hand, and tilted his head as if listening to something only he could hear. Then came the sound. It wasn't thunder or wind. It was deeper, older, and far more deliberate. A long, rising tone that echoed across the broken hills surrounding the compound. It didn't stop. It pulsed, growing louder with each breath, like a signal from a world that had forgotten how to care. Naira's blood ran cold. She had heard that sound before, once during a royal trial when a noble was sentenced to death. It was the call of a hunter, a special kind of enforcer trained to retrieve runaways and erase those who stood in the way. Not machines, not drones, but elite fighters wrapped in tradition and armor, sent only when the Empire wanted silence. They've sent someone, she whispered. Rowan nodded. A hunter. They wouldn't send one for a message, she said. No, he replied. They've sent him to take you back, or make sure you never leave. Her breath caught in her throat. We have to hide. They'll find you. They always do. She looked at him. He wasn't scared. He looked calm, almost like he'd been waiting for this. You've seen one of them before? She asked. I fought one once, he said. Long time ago? Did you win? Rowan didn't answer. He turned away and began walking toward the center of the compound, where the ground was clearer. Naira followed, unsure if he had even heard her. The signal tone had stopped now, but the silence it left behind was worse. Every corner of the compound felt like it was holding its breath. When the ship came, it did not roar like others. It moved, like a shadow, a sleek black vessel shaped like a blade. It dropped from the clouds without a sound, landing just beyond the main gate. Even from a distance, Naira could see the glow of its engines, red like fresh coals. The storm clouds above broke slightly, letting in pale light that made the ship shine like polished stone. The moment it touched the ground, the air felt colder. Rowan didn't flinch. He stood alone in the open, his weapon clutched tightly, his body still. Naira crouched behind a crumbling wall, peeking out just enough to watch. The door of the ship opened with a hiss. Smoke rolled out in waves, white and smooth. Then came the hunter. He stepped down like a ghost, silent and slow. His armor was bone white, layered like the plates of an insect, with glowing marks running along the sides. His face was hidden behind a smooth, black mask. No eyes, no mouth, just silence and power. In one hand, he held a weapon that buzzed, softly, alive with energy. "Return the girl," the hunter said, his voice sharp as broken glass. Rowan didn't move. "She's not yours anymore. She is property of the Empire. She's not property." The hunter took a step forward. His armor didn't creak or shift. It moved like it was part of him. "You are not authorized to hold her." "I'm not holding her," Rowan said. "She chose to stay. Then you'll both die for that choice." The hunter raised his weapon. Naira's heart pounded so loud she thought it would give them away. Rowan didn't lift his own weapon. He just smiled, a small one, filled with something strange. "Let me guess," he said. "You trained under Commander Jarrell." The hunter paused. "How do you know that name?" Rowan took a step forward. "I remember the way he bled." Without warning, he moved. It was like watching a storm strike. Rowan hurled the blade first, not to hit, but to distract. The hunter knocked it aside, and in that second, Rowan was already in front of him. His fist struck with such force the sound cracked through the rain. The hunter staggered back. Rowan didn't stop. He twisted, slammed a knee into the chest plate, and reached for the arm holding the weapon. A sharp twist, a sickening crack, the hunter shouted. Naira covered her mouth, watching with wide eyes. She'd never seen anyone fight like that. Rowan didn't move like a man who had spent weeks in a cage. He moved like someone who had never forgotten how to win. The hunter dropped to one knee, struggling to aim his weapon, but Rowan knocked it from his grip and kicked it across the compound. It sparked as it landed, useless. "You could have run," the hunter said through the mask. "I don't run," Rowan said. Then he struck again, a final blow that knocked the hunter flat. The mask cracked, revealing pale skin and a pair of shocked eyes beneath it. Rowan stood over him, chest rising and falling with steady breaths. "Tell your empire," he said quietly. "We're done being hunted." The hunter didn't respond. Rowan turned and walked back to where Naira was crouched. She stood slowly, her legs trembling. "You killed him," she said. "No," Rowan replied. "He's still breathing." "Why?" He looked at her. "Because he needs to carry the message back. And because I want them to know I'm not the one hiding anymore." The storm rolled again, softer now. The ship still sat at the edge of the yard, smoking gently in the dark. And Naira knew this was no longer about escape. This was something else. Something bigger. And she was already a part of it. The storm had passed, but the silence it left behind was heavy. Ash floated through the air like snow, settling on broken metal and shattered glass. The compound stood, quiet, but not dead. Something had changed. The fear that once haunted every corner now lingered with a new feeling. One Naira couldn't name. She sat near the ruins of a collapsed tower, her arms wrapped around her legs, watching the smoke drift from the hunter's ship. Beside her, Rowan sat sharpening another blade, calm as ever, like the fight had never happened. Days had passed since the hunter's defeat, but no one felt safe. Not really. Rowan had refused to kill him. and the man had limped back to his ship. Clutching his side, helmet cracked, eyes filled with something that wasn't just pain, maybe fear, or something close to respect. He hadn't said a word before leaving. The ship had lifted into the sky and disappeared, and no one knew what would come next. But everyone knew something would. Nara had spent the last few days helping rebuild the inside of the compound. Rowan had given orders to those who still lived in the shadows, survivors who had come out after the battle, drawn by the sound of a warrior standing against the Empire. There were more of them than she expected. Men, women, children, all wearing worn-out clothes and scars they didn't speak of. They looked at Rowan with hope. They looked at her with caution. She didn't blame them. At night, she stayed under a rusted shelter near Rowan's cage, though it no longer held him. The doors had been pried open the day after the fight, and no one tried to lock them again. Rowan didn't run. He stayed. He organized, planned, mapped, and every night he asked her more questions about her home, not just about tunnels or codes now, but about the people, the rulers, the weaknesses, the things no one wrote down. She answered everything. Somewhere in that silence, something inside her shifted. The weight of her old title felt less important. Now, she no longer thought about what she had lost. Instead, she thought about what might come next. One morning, a communication device was found buried under rubble. Miran, the younger rebel with the metal arm, managed to fix it enough to send a message. Naira had stared at it for a long time. With one push, she could call for rescue. She could return to Viralan, explain what happened, ask for protection. She could be a princess again. Rowan had watched her quietly from a distance but said nothing. She held the device in her hand that night, sitting beneath the dull stars. Her thumb hovered over the switch. She imagined the call going through, the Empire responding, ships flying in with banners and weapons, and her being pulled from the mud, cleaned up, and restored. But she also imagined what they would do to Rowan, to Miran, to all the people here who had helped her survive. The Empire would call it justice. She wasn't sure she would. The wind picked up, carrying the smell of oil and rust. She lowered the device and looked at the sky. It was the same sky she had grown up beneath, but it felt different now. Less hers, more shared. She thought about the girl who crawled through the mud, begging for help. And she thought about the woman she was becoming. She stood, walked to the edge of the compound, and threw the device into the broken waters that filled the old trench. It sank without a sound. Behind her, she heard footsteps. "You made a choice," Rowan said. She nodded. "You sure?" "Yes." He didn't smile, but his voice softened. "Then stay with us. We need people who know the system. We're not just hiding anymore. We're building something." "I'm not a leader," she said. "You were trained to be," he replied. "Now you get to decide what kind." In the days that followed, Naira worked beside them, not above them. She cleaned. She repaired broken systems. She taught others what she remembered about the structures the Empire used to build compounds like this one. Rowan led with silence, with calm, with purpose. Miran joked more often. Others joined, slow but steady, drawn by whispers of a princess who had chosen not to return. One evening, as the sun fell behind shattered towers, Rowan stood beside Naira and looked at the horizon. "They'll come again," he said. "I know. And when they do, it won't be one hunter." "I know." He turned to her. "You ready for that?" She took a long breath, the wind brushing against her face. "I'm not afraid anymore." He nodded. "Then let's show them we're more than what they left behind." The compound was no longer just ruins. It was becoming something new. A place not just to survive, but to resist. And in the quiet that followed, Naira understood. She had not just escaped her past, she had rewritten it. In the end, her name wouldn't be remembered for blood or gold, but for the choice she made when the stars stopped shining. And in the dark, her voice would echo with others who finally had one of their own.